Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joanna. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Here we are again. We can't believe that it's almost the mid-year and we just have so much to do. Today, we are talking about myths about indie authors and self-publishing. We did have 7 or 10, and now I've just got a pile of them. So that is going to be our segment today. But first up, we are writers first. And so, Orna, let's start with you. What is going on in your life? Your writing life?
Yeah, writing life. Everything's going on in all my lives. I think it's post pandemic. We're easing out of lockdown here, and life is changing just loads. I'm having one of those kind of periods that I think come along every number of years where things really change and you kind of go to a different level. So that's kind of where I feel I'm at the moment. I'm spending the summer away from the city and working in a co-working space for the first time. Our space in Free Word Centre unfortunately closed. We were there for many years and they've moved on. So yeah, and just really kind of enjoying it and splitting out my creative work from my other work in a physical way. So I've always kind of obviously split them apart, but now physically going into a different place to do actual kind of manager and marketeering kind of work, and separately doing the maker work in a little cubby hole. So really enjoying that and moving into audiobooks for my fiction at last. I found a great service where they actually help you to organize the narrators and everything. And so, yeah, that departure as well. So lots happening.
Yeah, and it's so funny. And we were talking about this before the show. We are both in co-working spaces. You're actually in one right now, and I'm not. I'm at home. But it's so funny because I did my first session today, and I'm the other way around. So I'm doing my fiction in the co-working space, and then I do my manager maker stuff here, my managery businessy stuff, my podcasting and all that. So and it's so weird going into a co-working space after many years, but my writing cafe now doesn't open at the time I used to write in, and I feel like I just want to get out the house. And of course there are all the various health things in place, but I just felt it was time, like you, I needed to shift up my creative process and get out of a rut. And it's funny because we talked about this like last April. It was like, oh my goodness, everything's changing. How do we recreate our artistic side and our routines? And now I feel like we're doing it again as we come out of a lot of the lockdowns. So that's been good. Also went on a cycling week, which again kind of chucked me out of my comfort zone because I'm not really a cyclist. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, I feel like I'm getting back to that creative side, which I feel like really suffered in the winter lockdown here in England. Here in the UK, it's been very difficult. So yeah, I feel like with the sun and the weather and these new spaces, so hopefully everyone listening coming into a new phase wherever you are in the world, I guess. And what about the Alliance? What's going on?
Yeah, always lots going on at Ally. We have these Apple Books webinars going on at the moment, how to sell more books on Apple, and filled up in 5 minutes kind of thing. So they only take 50 people at a time. So do let us know, members. It's member only. Do let us know if you want to be part of that. And the other thing that we're doing is we are looking at the whole ethics around AI for indie authors. So obviously you and I have spoken before about the copyright implications and all that kind of stuff, but this is more about using AI as a tool. And some authors seem to be really quite uncomfortable with the idea, and others are absolutely delighted to have this tool and waiting for it to get better and better. So we just wanted to look at are there ethical implications in terms of using it? What does it mean? How does it connect to any concerns we might be having around copyright? So we've just put out a call for comments on that. So if any of you who are listening are particularly interested in AI and what it means for our writing process or publishing process, we'd love to hear from you. You can comment on the article. It's selfpublishingadvice.org/AI comments, if you'd like to make a comment on that. And from the submissions that we get, we'll actually draw up some guidelines, and obviously bearing in mind that we don't have all the answers, and that indie is always a broad church and people have a lot of different opinions about this, as with everything else. Still, there are things that I think we need to be thinking about as we go forward.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to that. Okay, so let's get into the topic for today, which is myths about indie authors and self-publishing. So we're going to talk about a few myths that other people hold around indie authors, and then also some myths that too many of us hold. So I'm going to start by putting out there a myth that has been around for a long time. All self-published books are terrible, low quality, and responsible for a tsunami of crap, which was a term I think Joe Conrad first coined about a decade ago. Essentially, all self-published books are terrible. So, Orna, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, it's clearly and obviously untrue, and yet it's held very widely still in certain groups. I mean, readers don't even think about it anymore, and all the things that we said at the beginning about discoverability and how, you know, it's like a big iceberg, isn't it? And yes, there are people putting out books that are less than perfect, shall we say. There are authors who are just beginning their journey and don't really know how to publish, what makes a good book, or even maybe how to write. There's that whole kind of thing. But that can be a learning curve that very quickly is surmounted, and lots of books have been the pathway, poor books have been a pathway to a good book. So what's happening, I think, with authors is very often publishing too soon, perhaps, and drafts going out that are less than perfect. That's one aspect to it. And then, of course, there's all the bot stuff, and there's a whole load of stuff that's really, really awful. But it falls away. It's not important. Up at the top of that pyramid, you've got some fantastic work. And in every age, when there are lots of new people doing things in new ways, there's always an expansion, and what happens is the stuff at the top gets better and better because there's just more of it. And I think that's what we very much see with self-publishing. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, first of all, the tsunami of crap is not just from independent authors. There are quite a lot of really sort of terrible books coming out of traditional publishers as well, as we have seen with many of the celebrity memoirs would be, a favorite category. So one person's definition of crap is different to another person's, and we all have to decide what we want as readers. So we're absolutely acknowledging that there are books that aren't great out there, some of which are written and published by indie authors, many of which are not. And I think that's the point, is that not all indie authors are the same. And this kind of brings us to another myth, and that someone who scrapes information off the internet and puts it up on Kindle is not the same as many of the members of the Alliance of Independent Authors who are committed to putting out quality books, doing the best they can at the point at which they're publishing. And that's a really important point as well. The other thing is, I always find that this sort of devalues the readers. We do have gatekeepers, and those gatekeepers are readers, and readers are not stupid, and we are not stupid. We read a lot of books. I see a lot of crap on when I go shopping for books, which is almost every single day. And basically, I know what I don't want, and I know what I want. And that's what we have to think. Readers are intelligent enough to ignore all of that stuff that they don't want to read and pick up the stuff they do want to read. So let's get more into that indies are all the same myth, because you brought this one up. You see a lot of different types.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different, and diversity has just exploded as a result of self-publishing. So if anything, trade publishing is much more homogenous than an independent publishing. So what we've seen is first of all sorts of different genres emerging, niching down into all sorts of different, tiny niches that we didn't know existed that are super popular once you've got a global audience, and they can be facilitated. So we've got diversity at that level in terms of content, but also, of course, self-publishing is there. You can do it, there's nobody kind of stopping you. You don't have to have an Ivy League degree, or you don't have to have anything except the will to actually sit down there and do it. Now, that doesn't mean that absolutely everybody can do it, and obviously there are literacy issues and publishing literacy and all that kind of stuff going on still, and there are still barriers to entry. It's not a complete open door, but it's so much more open. And so as a result of that, you're seeing groups of people whose voices we didn't hear before are coming through loud and clear, and that's having an effect then right throughout publishing. So I think that's one of the most positive things about self-publishing. Is one of the things that I love most about it is just this diversity of voices that it allows.
And the other thing about not being all the same is the way that we publish. So again, I think because there is a loud majority who focus on ebooks in KU, a lot of people outside the indie community think that that's all there is to being an indie, whereas actually there's a huge group of people who do things in very different ways, from the people who do, say, the print-only zines, which are these, little chapbooks of things which are very creative and often very visual as well. Poets, for example, do a lot of these types of things that don't necessarily even exist in digital form, that are a physical object. Only we've now got a growing number of people doing crowdfunding to do beautiful books in all different ways, and now the new form of crowdfunding, which you could say through NFTs on blockchain, which is, the sort of emerging way of doing things that is crossing over from the digital to the physical realm. We've got audio first projects starting to emerge. So those are all just some things. Indies are not the same in terms of what they're producing by genre, also who they are and where they are in the world, and also what formats they produce too. So we are indeed a very diverse community, and this it is both wonderful and a problem, because it means the myth, people think that because they think a certain way that everybody thinks the same as them, and that's not true.
And I think particularly when it comes to the publishing aspect of it. So
sorry, this just made your audio worse. Whatever you just did.
Okay, somebody said that it's distorted. I don't know why.
No, it's better where it was. Yeah, okay. Sorry if it's distorted. That will just be on the video, so we'll edit that out for the audio, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely for the podcast. I'm not sure what's happening there. It was fine last week.
I think it's your internet connection, but don't worry, carry on.
Okay, yes, it could be actually. I'm going to try a different one.
While Orna comes in and out of the internet, I will carry on. So another myth about indie authors is that we only, and we're quite militant about being self-published only and not doing traditional publishing or signing rights deals. And that's not true either. So basically, there's a myth that we can't get a traditional publishing deal. There's a myth that perhaps we are against traditional publishing, and that's definitely not true. I'm totally winging it because Orna's not come back. So I'm going to carry on a little bit, but feel free to put your questions. If you are attending live, I can always answer questions while we wait for Orna. Okay, so I'll come back to some of the myths. So just on licensing rights, essentially lots of indie authors are now licensing rights. So for example, I license, and she's back. I've been totally winging it. We just have to edit all of that out.
I'm so glad you stay there. I have changed my Wi-Fi, which it wasn't supposed to cut me off, but I think should be delivering a better sound, hopefully.
Not really.
Not worth it. Okay. Where were we?
So I had just talked about indies are not all the same, you might have had a comment, but I was kind of moving on. So
Okay.
I'll just start again. So, because we can cut this out.
Yeah, we can cut this out.
So another myth that comes up is the relationship, I guess, with traditional publishing, that indies can't get a traditional publishing deal, that indie authors hate traditional publishing in some way, and that we think it's wrong and nobody should traditionally publish, that we, you know, all the sort of licensing rights things, we just can't do that. So why is that a myth, Orna, and what are the different things that authors are doing in this space?
Yeah, this is one that actually drives me crazy, because I come across, it's obvious to everybody that indies are publishing ebooks, print on demand, audiobooks, and doing extremely well, because you're seeing that in the sales on the platforms. It's undeniable, but we're not seeing behind the scenes so much indies who are selling, doing licensing deals and doing other kinds of deals that traditionally have only been possible for trade publishers, and that a lot of people think still isn't possible for indie authors. So even the concept of kind of hybrid author, I have a real problem with, because I think indie author describes that perfectly. Sometimes we'll self-publish. Sometimes if somebody comes along with a nice deal, we'll take that, if it's a good deal and it works for a particular book at a particular point in time. Being an independent author means doing that. It means meeting a rights buyer with your business hat on, and trashing out a deal. They'll be working on their behalf to get the best deal possible, and you go working on your behalf to get the best deal possible, and it's called negotiation. So these are skills that indie authors are now gaining, and we are seeing a big difference in terms. This is something that people weren't thinking about at all, I would say 5 years ago, or very little. When we wrote a guide to it, it hardly sold, that guide then. It sells much more now, and members download it far more often now. So yeah, there is nothing to stop an indie author from pursuing rights deals, and indeed, once you achieve a certain level of visible success, and this doesn't happen so much for those who sell direct, but for those who are very visible on particularly on Amazon, you'll just get the rights buyers coming to you, wanting to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, I have books in French that are licensed, and in South Korea that are licensed, that did sort of emerge over time. This is how we know people in the community who've done this in so many different genres. I was listening to Podium Publishing on the Six Figure Authors podcast, which is a great podcast. People should listen to that one. And they were talking about how they do pick up successful indies, from looking at their ebook sales, and that's their business model. And I mean, they picked up I think they're responsible for Andy Weir's The Martian.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. Audiobook, which obviously, and now his sequels come out, and the movie and all of that. And Hugh Howey, another one, has just announced that his Wool, this must be a decade after Wool, came out as a novella originally. He expanded it in an ebook. He got a print only deal, and now it's been picked up for a second lot of movie rights, and will be on Apple, I think, and TV. So this has taken a decade, but Hugh's a good example of someone who's kind of moved one piece of IP through lots of different processes outside of where he started. So yeah, I think and also this, what annoys me, someone said it to me at a literary event. Oh, you're not one of those militant indies who hates us being traditionally published authors or traditional publishing. And I'm like, sorry, I don't, definitely not. We're readers, we love books, we love authors, we love publishing. I'm always spending money on publishers' products. And that's not it at all. It's not a anti-them approach. It's just a choice for our business and our creative work. And as you say, we can choose to work with different partners, some of whom might be publishers over time. So I think probably 5 to 7 years ago, there was a sort of militant arm, but I don't think that's so true anymore. I think a lot more indies are open, and a lot of traditionally published authors are coming into indie as well.
Absolutely. But what does drive me crazy is an assumption that you are indie because you couldn't get a trade deal, because very often the deal isn't worth the paper it's written on. I mean, I have yet to sign, I get offers, but I'm not signing any of them because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So I think also when Hugh did his print-only deal back then, it was huge in the sense that it was the first that people had heard about, and not that it was such a huge deal, it was a good deal, but now it happens all the time, at a small level as well. You see people who say, okay, I can't be bothered doing print, and POD isn't even, worth it. I would like to work with a small indie publisher who will put my book into bookstores. And not because of the money, because the money is rarely good in that model, but because I want to be in bookstores. That's something that indies want. I think that's the biggest thing of all. Whatever it is you want, whatever your definition of success is, there is a way to do it as an independent author. It doesn't mean that you give up your independence because you choose to do one thing or another. And it certainly doesn't mean that you couldn't do something else, and this is some kind of poor second best. And for many people, it's the absolute opposite.
Yes, definitely one of my business choices from day one. But one of the things that also really annoys me, I hear so much, is all you do when you're an indie author is marketing. Like, that indie authors just do marketing, whereas we traditionally published authors, we just write. We only have to write. And I'm like, so I have something like 32 books at this point, and I've been an indie for a decade. And Lindsay Baroka put out a tweet the other day. She's written over 80 books in her decade and they're like epic fantasy, sort of 120,000 word each. And it's like, I'm sorry, do indies only market? I think some of the hardest working, most prolific writers, just writing words every day, are indie authors now. And if you look at the number of words coming out of the self-publishing people and the number of words that a traditionally published author will publish in a year, we're talking orders of magnitude. So yes, indie authors understand that we have to market, but sorry, traditionally published authors have to market too. But I actually think the bulk of writing right now is coming out of the indie community. I don't know, what do you think, Orna?
Yeah, I think this is such a myth, and it's a very understandable one, because we can fall guilty to it ourselves. We can say, oh, if only I didn't have to do all this business stuff, I'd have so much more time for writing. And as you say, the facts just don't back that up. And in fact, knowing that you can put out a book whenever you want on your own schedule to suit your own creative conditions and your own creative rhythm and flow and so on seems to be hugely energizing, because in trade publishing, you won't get the slots. So, for example, some of the series and things that we've seen coming out, and that we see all the time coming out of self-publishing, there's just no way that a trade publisher would allow it. Similarly, all the authors, you and I included, who write all over the ranch and who like to do nonfiction one time, I do a lot, nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. Nobody's going to take you on and let that happen. All of these things generate more writing, and and signs on it. We see it all over the place. So it is a notion, and it is a complete myth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then okay, so one of the other things, and I thought for years that anyone could be a successful indie author, and I've now come to the conclusion that that is a myth, because I actually think, this sort of myth that, oh, you just upload a book, MS Word document to Kindle and you're a successful indie author. This is a myth, and unfortunately it's quite a damaging myth for early stage indie authors. But I equally think there's a damaging myth in traditional publishing, which is if you get an agent and then if you get a book deal, you will be successful as a traditionally published author. So I think there's these early stage myths that can lead you into some disappointment. But all you really need to do at that point is learn the skills to move to the next level. But I do think it is a myth that anyone could be successful self-publishing. You do have to learn a lot of skills, craft and business in order to get there. Any more on those myths?
Yeah, I suppose we're kind of slightly moving into now away from the myths that other people hold into the ones we kind of hold about ourselves. And I think, yeah, you've said all on that. I don't think I've anything to add to that one.
Okay. Well, one that I also hear is I'll never be a proper writer, proper in inverted commas, unless I am traditionally published. So what do you think about that? Because I have been traditionally published in other languages, but not in English. But you have come out of traditional publishing. So what about this myth that many people hold, which is I'll never be a proper writer, I'll never be acceptable in some way?
It's a myth. It's absolute for all the reasons that we've been talking about already. But again, I think some of these myths are kind of understandable. There's always a thing that you haven't done is something that you want, isn't it? And you assume, you don't see the downside. It's the faraway hills are green kind of thing. So, and because trade publishing did have such a grip on the whole publishing sector for all of the 20th century, and particularly intensely towards the second half of the 20th century, then self-publishing came along, and it's a whole kind of new way of doing it. There is still, in the wider world, so very often people indies say to me, I'm happy, I love it, I don't want it, but my mom would just love if I got a deal, and, you know, or my family or my friends or whatever, I want to do it for them or whatever. But the idea that some third party saying, yes, this book works for our business model in some way makes you a better writer, clearly it's a myth.
Well, but then I would counter on this, which is when there are myths that we hold, we have to change them with empowering stories and kind of rewrite the myth in some way. So I think this I'll never be a proper writer is the need for validation. The fact if an external party, a respected external party like an agent or a publisher says you are good enough, then you feel validated. So what we have to do is find ways to be validated within the community that we're in. And I guess a common one is book sales, a common one is income, reviews, emails from happy readers, which means so much. I think we can all agree. What are the other ways, Orna, that we can counteract that myth?
Yeah, I think the reader relationship is the big one, and I think, you know, that sort of the closeness of that relationship that we get, where we cut out all the middle people, you know, and we just have that relationship. And it's so, particularly if we're selling direct from our own websites, and you know, they're buying from us in that way, or they're people who are on our mailing lists or supporting us on Patreon or part of our membership group or whatever. And I know that you don't have to be indie to do these things, but I think being indie gives you A, more incentive, but B, it's the closeness of that relationship. So you've just got the two imaginations that are kind of coming together in the books and nothing else coming in between. And because then that's reflected in covers and it's reflected in other aspects of your publishing and your platform, how you put yourself out there, how you talk to your readers, how they talk to you, how accessible and open you are, you know, all of these things are much more evident on the indie side. And I think that's where we get our validation. Our readers are the people who get us and get what we're doing, and you can forget about everybody else. And I think it's a far more stable and scalable. Also, it can grow rather than, you know, somebody else's decisions very often deciding that actually, you know, your readers fall away because somebody else made some kind of call that you had nothing to do with. And I personally found that very, very frustrating.
Yeah, or when I've met several traditionally published authors who were huge, like back in the 90s or something, and then they're let go, things change, and they don't have any way to contact the readers or any ownership of the series that they used to write. And it's like, whoa, okay, things change, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But into something else I find difficult in the community, and one that I definitely believe that I had to tackle in myself, was this idea that certain genres are worth more or worth less than others, and that it is better, again in inverted commas, to write certain genres, and less worthy or less important to write other ones. And classically, the genre that is the least appreciated in traditional publishing, which is romance, is one of the highest earning and most sort of voracious readership amongst indies. And so, I learned when I met all the romance ladies back in the 2011, 2012, I was blown away by how far ahead the romance community is, by the amount of money they were making. I was like, whoa, okay, why is traditional publishing so down on this incredible genre that basically powers so many other genres? Because romance, let's face it, underpins the world, and all the other genres, it appears in different ways. So I hate this. This drives me nuts now, and I will stamp on it when I hear it, which is this sort of stigma in writing certain genres. So what do you think, Orna? And like, why is this still so endemic amongst writers? Like, what's more worthy?
Yeah, I really think this comes out of trade publishing, but not only trade publishing, also authors themselves. So, literary fiction is valued because, and those kinds of genre, heavy political books, or literary nonfiction, creative nonfiction, all that kind of stuff, more than genres that sell much more, and that has always been the way. But I think it's purely down to the fact that that's what people who work in publishing like to read, and therefore they literally value that genre more because that's their own kind of reading. And huge numbers of you never know what is a great book until time passes or it crosses borders. Really, you need to kind of get it out there. Certainly a book that isn't appreciated by a lot of people is rarely great, and most of the literary fiction of the last 50 years is nowhere to be seen now. And genre books that are incredibly amazing stand the test of time and stand the test of crossing borders. So yeah, it is kind of snobbery, which it is, really drives me completely crazy. And you talk about the ability of the romance writer to engage their reader, and they're such, everything new that has happened in indie, it's been the romance writers who have kind of broken those barriers. But it's the same in trade publishing. They completely and utterly underwrote all those other books that got big advances that went nowhere. But without getting any of the credit, and without getting any, they're hidden down the back of the shop, or not even visible at all. And so, yeah, it's an absolute. Is it a myth, or is that even the right word for it?
Well, you put this under. I think I put it in under myths too many of us hold, and the myth that some genres are better than others. That for some reason you're a more worthy writer if you write some kind of genres. I still think it definitely pervades the community. I spoke at another online summit recently, and someone started saying this. It's a combination of the tsunami of crap thing, and the intimation by another author was that the tsunami of crap was all the genre fiction. And boy, I stomped on that quickly, especially because I write genre fiction. And I don't write romance, but lots of us write other things in genre fiction. And so it kind of stunned me that someone on the one hand could be so pro indie and on the other hand so down on certain genres. So what we're trying to encourage you all listening is to kind of be open-minded and celebrate everything that everyone is writing, and put the half of the point of being indie is let it fall where it may. And there may be a readership, there might not be, but that's not for you to judge someone else's choice of creative output, I guess.
And also that every genre is a genre. Like the idea that this is genre fiction and this isn't a genre, but it's just a genre for different readers. It's just not called genre fiction, it's called literary fiction or whatever. It's just a different label. Everything is, of course, we have our preferred genre. We have what we like to read. That's a different thing. And, that I think is, again, what is fed so very well by self-publishing. But yeah, the idea that one genre is superior to another is the same sort of hierarchy that says one person is superior to another. It's nonsense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and someone's just commented about Stacey Abrams, who's writing. I think she's just she has written some romance. I think her latest deal is on thrillers. She is, I believe, she's the politician out of Georgia in the US who has done an incredible job in the political sphere and is proudly writing genre fiction. Like, what a woman! She's doing. I'm pretty sure that's the right person. So that's brilliant. Okay, so. Another myth that's a sort of business money thing, which is authors can't make money. This isn't just about indies, authors can't make money, income, cost matters more than return on investment, like lots of myths around money. Now, Orna, you've been doing quite a lot on creatives and money. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm always super interested in the myths we feed ourselves and in how they can limit us, and in challenging the things that you find yourself saying to yourself. So I get all the time this assumption that authors don't make money. People will say to me, well, you can't make money writing books, you can't make money self-publishing books, poets never make any money. I hear all the time. Wrong, because they do. They can, not only can they, but they do, and they're there, and it's happening, and it's right there in front of you. And if you hold that belief, then you're not actually allowing it to happen for you. So it's really important that we challenge. I hate marketing is another one. Well, that's probably because you haven't thought about it enough, and you haven't gone in there enough, and you haven't worked out how your marketing connects to your writing and how you reach the readers through, because marketing these days, if you're using social media, which most people are, is actually writing. So it just doesn't make any sense to feed yourself that line. Another indie thing that I come across with self-publishers a lot is it's too expensive. You suggest something that they could do to increase their sales, it's too expensive. But expensive isn't what matters. It's a myth that anything is expensive, actually, if the return on investment warrants it. So we shouldn't ever be looking at the pure cost of something. We should be looking at the plan we have, the money plan we have, and whether we can make that money back with some more money. And then it's something quite different. Another one on the business and money front is that your business income is your income. So, a lot of authors don't have a business head and don't really understand how business works. I didn't when I started. I hadn't a clue. I shunned business. Business was not me, and all of that kind of thing. And I thought, when I saw money coming through, I didn't differentiate between that and actually paying myself a salary out of, and that's my income. Everything else it belongs to the business. So yeah, there are a lot of myths that we feed ourselves that are not helpful for us.
Yeah, so as we come to the end, there are lots more myths, but we don't have any more time tonight. So I just wanted to round up by saying part of the reason we talk about these myths is so that we can recognize them. And what we want you to do is potentially identify the myths that you have around self-publishing, around you as a creative, maybe around money, and listen out for things that other people say so that you can recognize it. Because so often someone will say something and we react emotionally. And I know like that stigma sort of self-publishing can still affect people emotionally when they know that it's a myth. And then to really just take action on trying to change the myths, particularly that you have around yourself and around the community. You can't change other people's opinions, to be honest. All we can do is live in a way that demonstrates the myths are wrong. So create brilliant books, high quality in whatever genre you want, and be a happy indie by choice. Like all these things we can do to bust the myths and hang out in communities like the Alliance of Independent Authors where people are myth busting all the time. Orna, any other tips on busting myths and getting out of that?
I think the ability to recognize your own self-talk, and to catch yourself and to hear it. And very often when we're feeding ourselves a myth, we kind of know it's not true, then going one level down as to what we're really kind of thinking. So sometimes, it's I hate marketing, but what lies under that is actually I'm afraid to put myself out there. That's just an example. So, first of all, hearing yourself when you're saying these things to yourself, hearing other people, and then having that conversation that kind of goes a little bit deeper, because our work is fascinating. We're not just writers, we're publishers as well, we're business people as well. We're growing like crazy all the time, challenging ourselves creatively and in every sort of way. And sometimes, just recognizing that and really going for it, that's when the myths dissolve or get exploded.
Yes, let's bust the myths. Fantastic. So next month, we are doing a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about the nimble advantage, indie authors in an era of accelerating change. Because as I'm sure many of you have read in the news and things have accelerated due to the pandemic and due to a lot of more business and e-commerce going online. So we're going to talk about the basics and what to hold on to when things are changing, the mindset of dealing with change, and what's happening in traditional publishing, and also the technological tools that are coming along, and how we can be nimble because we own all our IP or we've licensed it with a good contract. So that is next month, and we're excited about that. That's something we talk and think about a lot. So Orna, anything else you want to announce or share?
No, just to reiterate the call at the beginning that if you are interested if you didn't get a place for the Apple sales webinars and you are interested, to just drop a line to info@allianceindependentauthors.org, and we'll see if we have another 50 people to fill a new one. I think we do. All right, that's it.
Fantastic. And thanks to everyone who's joined us live and all the comments you've put. Sorry, we haven't addressed them all, but we really appreciate your live comments. I've certainly been looking at them, and we'll address some of them in the Facebook group, I'm sure. But thank you, everyone, I guess, and happy writing.
And happy publishing. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.